Caleb Weston kicked open his front door and fired his rifle into the dark. The wolves scattered. And that's when he saw her, face down in the snow, 10 feet from his porch, a child no older than 11, with a bundle strapped to her chest that wasn't moving. He dropped the rifle, ran, flipped her over. Her lips were blue. Her eyes were open but seeing nothing. The bundle against her chest was a baby, gray-skinned, silent. He pressed his ear to the infant's mouth. Nothing. Then, faint as a dying candle, a breath. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Ellie's story reaches. Hit that subscribe button, follow my channel, and stay with me until the very end, because what happens next in this blizzard will change everything. Caleb carried them both inside. The girl weighed nothing. The baby weighed less. He laid them on the floor by the wood stove, and his hands moved before his mind caught up, pulling blankets off the sofa, feeding wood into the fire, grabbing the kettle. The girl's feet were purple-black, no shoes, a cotton dress thin as paper, soaked through and stiff with ice. Who in God's name let a child walk into a Montana blizzard dressed like that? The baby hadn't made a sound. Caleb unwrapped the frozen shawl with fingers that shook. The infant was small, too small for 7 or 8 months. Skin like candle wax, lips the color of ash. He pressed 2 fingers below her jaw and waited. A pulse. Weak. Slow. But there. She alive? Caleb's head snapped up. The girl was conscious, barely. Her eyes focused on him from the floor, wild and burning. Yeah, she's alive. Thank God. The girl tried to sit up and collapsed. Thank God. Thank God. Don't move. You hear me? Stay flat. My sister. Give her to me. She needs warming, skin to skin. You know about that? Mama taught me. The girl's teeth chattered so hard, the words came out broken. Put her on my chest, under the blanket, body heat. Caleb did it. Laid the baby against the girl's bare skin, piled every blanket he had over both of them. The girl wrapped her arms around the infant and held on like the world was trying to tear them apart. What's your name? Caleb asked. Ellie. Ellie Morgan. She's Josie. 7 months. Caleb Weston. How long you been out there? Since morning. His gut dropped. Since morning. In this. Yes, sir. Where'd you come from? Aunt Harriet's, near Laramie. Caleb's hands went still on the blanket. Laramie's 40 miles. I know. In December. With a baby. On foot. Didn't have much choice. Ellie pressed her face against Josie's head. She put us out. Caleb stood and went to the stove. He needed to move, needed to do something with his hands before the anger building in his chest found its way to his mouth. He heated broth, poured it into a cup, brought it back. Drink. Slow. Ellie took the cup. Her hand shook so bad he had to steady it. The first swallow made her gasp, and tears shot down her face. Easy, not too fast. She drank half, then pushed the cup away. Josie needs some. You first. She's a baby. She goes first. Caleb looked at this child giving orders from the floor, half frozen, barely conscious, and still putting her sister ahead of herself. He grabbed a clean rag, dipped it in warm broth, and showed her how to drip it onto the baby's lips. For 10 minutes, nothing. Drip. Wait. Drip. Wait. The baby's mouth stayed slack. Ellie's breathing got faster. Come on, Josie. Ellie's voice cracked. Come on, please, you gotta drink. You gotta. Drip. Wait. The baby's tongue moved. There. Caleb leaned closer. She's swallowing. See that? I see it. Ellie was crying now. I see it. She's drinking. Keep going. Slow and steady. They worked in silence after that. Drip, swallow. Drip, swallow. Josie's eyes fluttered. Her fists uncurled. A sound came from her throat, thin and reedy. Not a cry, but not silence. Ellie sagged against the floor and sobbed. No sound, just her body shaking and tears running sideways across her temples into her hair. She cried the way people cry when they've learned that noise brings punishment instead of comfort. Caleb let her be. He fed the stove, heated more broth, found a pair of wool socks in the trunk by the door. Ruth's socks. He hadn't opened that trunk in 2 years. His hand hovered over the lid for 3 heartbeats before he pulled it open. The smell hit him first. Lavender. Ruth used to tuck lavender sachets in with her woolens. The scent punched through 2 years of careful numbness, and for a second he was back in their bedroom, watching her fold laundry, humming something, her hair falling across her face. He grabbed the socks and shut the trunk hard. Here. He knelt beside Ellie. These'll help your feet. Whose are they? Don't matter. Put them on. Ellie sat up enough to pull the socks over her destroyed feet. She winced, but didn't make a sound. Caleb saw the blisters, burst and bleeding, the skin between her toes cracked and raw. 40 miles on bare feet through snow. Why didn't your aunt give you shoes? He asked. He kept his voice level. Barely. She said I didn't deserve the ones she bought me. Said I'd been ungrateful. Ellie pulled the socks up carefully. Said ungrateful children walk barefoot. It's in the Bible somewhere. It ain't in any Bible I ever read. I don't think Aunt Harriet reads much Bible. She just uses it when she wants to hit you with something that sounds holy. Caleb almost laughed. Would have, if the situation weren't so ugly. You hungry? Yes, sir. But Josie first. Josie's drinking broth. She's doing good. Now it's your turn. He went to the pantry, came back with bread and dried venison, set it in front of her. Eat slow. Your stomach's been empty too long. Rush it and you'll get sick. Ellie ate with the controlled desperation of someone who'd learned to eat fast before food got taken away. Even trying to go slow, she tore through the bread in minutes. Caleb brought more without comment. When's the last time you ate? He asked. Day before yesterday. Aunt Harriet gave me a piece of bread when she put us out. It froze solid by nightfall. A piece of bread. For 40 miles. And a jar of water. That froze too. Caleb's fists clenched under the table. What else she give you? A piece of paper with the name of a mission in Douglas. Said they take orphans. Said to walk north. Douglas is 60 miles from Laramie. I know that now. I didn't know it then. I'm not good with distances. Ellie wiped crumbs from her mouth. Got turned around in the storm. Thought I was heading north, but I must have gone west. The snow makes everything look the same. You knocked on doors? Every one I passed. 4 farms, maybe 5. Her voice went flat. First one, nobody answered. Second one, a man looked through the window and closed the curtain. Third one, a woman opened the door, saw Josie, said, I can't get involved, and shut it. Which farms? Don't know the names. One had a red barn, about 10 miles south. The Hendersons. Caleb filed that away. After the third door, I stopped knocking for a while. Just walked. Josie stopped crying around noon today. Ellie's hand found her sister through the blanket. That's when I got real scared. Mama always said a quiet baby is a sick baby. Your mama was smart. She was smart about a lot of things, Not about Aunt Harriet, though. Ellie adjusted the blanket around Josie. Mama made me promise before she died. Said, take care of your sister. Said Harriet would help. Said, family helps family. What happened to your mama? Died having Josie. Bled too much. The midwife couldn't stop it. Ellie said it the way you say, the sky is blue. A fact so big, it had gone past feeling. She held Josie once, said her name. Then she was gone. And your pa? Dead 6 months before that. Cave-in at the silver mine. Ellie met his eyes. So it was just me and Josie and Aunt Harriet. And Aunt Harriet made it real clear, real fast, that we were a problem she didn't want. What do you mean? I mean I cooked every meal, cleaned every room, washed every piece of laundry, took care of Josie day and night. And she still called me lazy. Still said I wasn't earning my keep. Still said we were eating her out of house and home. Ellie's jaw tightened. I was 10. Josie was a newborn. We didn't eat that much. Caleb poured her more broth. His hands were steady, but something behind his ribs was shaking. So why'd she put you out? The real reason. Ellie was quiet for a moment. Josie stirred against her chest, making small sounds, warming. Mr. Pemberton, Ellie said finally. George Pemberton. He owns the general store in Laramie. He started coming for supper on Sundays. Aunt Harriet would put on her good dress, make me cook something fancy. She'd be all sweetness and smiles. A whole different person. Ellie pulled the blanket higher around Josie. But she told me to keep Josie quiet during his visits. Said a crying baby would scare him off. Said no man wants a woman who comes with baggage. So I'd take Josie outside, even when it was cold. Walk her around until she fell asleep, then sit in the barn until Mr. Pemberton left. How long? Hours, sometimes. One night Josie had a fever. She screamed, and I couldn't stop it. Mr. Pemberton was inside, and he looked annoyed. Aunt Harriet came to the back door and told me to take Josie to the barn and not come back until he was gone. Caleb's coffee cup creaked in his grip. How cold was it? Cold enough I could see my breath in the barn. I wrapped Josie in every horse blanket I could find and held her all night. The fever broke by morning, but Aunt Harriet was furious. Said I'd embarrassed her. Said Mr. Pemberton told her he wouldn't marry a woman saddled with someone else's orphans. Ellie looked straight at Caleb. 2 days later, she handed me a piece of bread and told me to start walking. Because of a man. Because of a man who didn't want children around. Caleb set the cup down carefully. If he gripped it any harder, it would shatter. She put 2 children in a blizzard to keep a suitor happy. She said we were ruining her last chance. Said she'd given us more than we deserved. Said if I came back, she'd have me arrested for trespassing. Ellie's voice didn't waver. She'd cried it all out already on that 40-mile walk. She said nobody would miss us. The fire crackled. Wind slammed against the windows. Somewhere in the barn, a horse stamped nervously. She was wrong about that, Caleb said quietly. Ellie looked at him. You don't even know us. Don't need to. I know what I pulled out of the snow tonight. A girl who walked 40 miles through a killing storm to save her baby sister. A girl who gave her last water to an infant before she drank herself. A girl who knocked on every door she found and got turned away and kept going. He met her eyes. I don't need to know you to know you're worth something, Ellie Morgan. Any fool could see that. Ellie's chin trembled. She bit down on it hard. We won't be any trouble. Stop saying that. But we won't, I promise. I can cook and clean and I'll take care of Josie myself. You won't even know we're here. I want to know you're here. The words came out before Caleb could stop them. They surprised him. He cleared his throat. "There's a room upstairs, second door on the left. Bed's clean." "Whose room?" "It was my wife's sewing room." "Your wife?" "She passed 2 years ago." Ellie studied him for a long moment.
"You got that same look," she said softly.
"What look?"
"The one Mama had near the end. Like you're here, but you're not really here. Like part of you went somewhere else and didn't come back."
Caleb's throat closed up. He stood, turned away, busied himself with the stove, because if he kept looking at this child who could see right through him, something was going to break that he'd spent 2 years holding together. "Get some sleep," he said. "Both of you. We'll sort things out in the morning." Ellie gathered Josie against her chest and stood on legs that barely held. She made it to the stairs, one hand on the railing, and stopped.
"Caleb."
"Yeah?"
"Thank you for coming outside."
Wolves were at the fence. Had to.
"No, I mean—"
She paused.
"Every other door I knocked on, somebody looked and decided we weren't worth the trouble. You came outside with a rifle in the dark in a blizzard. You didn't even know what was out there. You just came."
"Guess I did."
"Why?"
He thought about that. Thought about the moment he'd heard the scratching at the gate. How his first instinct had been to ignore it. Pour another drink. Let the storm handle whatever was out there. How he'd stood at the door for 5 full seconds with his hand on the latch, fighting every instinct to stay sealed in his silence. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe I was tired of being the kind of man who doesn't open doors." Ellie nodded, like that made sense to her. Then she climbed the stairs, slow, careful, the baby pressed against her heart, and disappeared into Ruth's sewing room. Caleb stood alone in his kitchen. The fire popped, the storm raged, and the house that had been dead for 2 years now held 3 beating hearts instead of 1. He sat at the table and looked at Ruth's photograph on the mantel. Her smile, her hand on her belly. 3 months before the diphtheria. "I don't know what I'm doing, Ruth," he whispered. "But I opened the door. I finally opened the damn door." Around 3 in the morning, a sound drifted down through the floorboards that stopped him cold. Josie. Crying. Not the weak flutter from before, a real cry. Loud. Angry. The sound of a baby who'd crawled back from the edge and was furious about everything she'd been through. Caleb gripped the table edge, and something cracked in his chest. Not grief this time. Something he didn't have a name for yet. He heated milk, carried it upstairs, set it outside the sewing room door with a clean rag for feeding. Knocked once, soft, and retreated before Ellie could catch him hovering. 15 minutes later, the crying stopped. Drinking sounds replaced it. Then quiet. Then, so faint he almost missed it, a girl's voice humming a lullaby through the floorboards. A melody he didn't recognize. Something her mama probably sang to her. Passed down from the grandmother who came from Ireland with nothing but a needle and a prayer. Caleb sat at his dead wife's kitchen table and listened to a stranger's child sing his house back to life. Tomorrow, the storm would break. Tomorrow, questions would need answers. Tomorrow, the world would come knocking with its laws and its blood claims and its cold arithmetic of who belonged to whom. But tonight, the door was open, and Caleb Weston, for the first time in 2 years, didn't want to close it. The girls slept for 16 hours straight. Caleb checked on them 3 times, once at dawn, once at noon, once when the storm finally broke and sunlight cut through the clouds like a blade. Each time, Ellie was curled around Josie, on top of the quilt, not under it, arms locked around the baby, even in sleep. like she was still protecting her. Like stopping, even unconscious, wasn't something her body knew how to do. On the third check, he left a cup of water and some bread on the nightstand. When he came back from the barn an hour later, both were gone. The bed was made tight enough to bounce a coin off. Every surface in the sewing room had been wiped clean. Ruth's fabric scraps, still sitting on the cutting table after 2 years, had been folded into neat squares and stacked by color. He found Ellie in the kitchen. She'd swept the floor, scrubbed the counter, washed every dish in the basin, and was standing at the stove with Josie in a sling made from an old tablecloth, stirring something that smelled like it had no business coming out of his kitchen. "Morning," she said without turning around. "Found oats and some dried apples. There was cinnamon in the back of the shelf. Hope that's all right. You don't have to cook. I said I'd work." She glanced at him, and there was iron in that look. "I keep my word." Caleb walked to the stove, looked in the pot. The porridge was smooth, perfectly done. The kind of thing Ruth used to make on cold mornings when the world outside was too harsh to face without something warm in your belly. "Where'd you learn this?" he asked. "Mama. She said cooking was the one thing nobody could take from you. Said you could lose your house, your money, your name, but if you could feed people, you'd always matter." Ellie adjusted Josie in the sling. "I cooked every meal at Aunt Harriet's, breakfast, lunch, supper. She said if I was going to eat her food, I'd better learn to make it. You were 10 years old. 9 when I started, turned 10 in June." Ellie pulled 2 bowls from the cabinet like she'd lived here her whole life. "Should I eat in the other room?" "Why in hell would you do that?" "Aunt Harriet said children eat separate. Said it was rude for children to sit at an adult's table." Caleb pulled out a chair and sat down. "This is your table too. Sit." Ellie set the bowls down, served the porridge, and slid into the chair across from him. Josie babbled against her chest, reaching for the spoon. They ate in silence for a while. The porridge was the best thing Caleb had tasted in 2 years, maybe longer. "This is real good," he said. Ellie's shoulders dropped half an inch. The first time he'd seen any tension leave her body since she arrived. "Thank you." "Ellie?" "Yes, sir?" "You can stop calling me sir. I ain't your employer." "What should I call you?" "Caleb works fine." She tested the name silently, her lips moving, then nodded like she'd made a decision about something. After breakfast, she reached for the dishes. Caleb stopped her. "Leave them." "But they need washing." "They can wait. Sit back down." Something flickered across her face. Fear. Fast and sharp. There and gone. She sat. "I need to look at your feet," Caleb said. "Proper. In the daylight." "They're fine." "They ain't fine. You walked 40 miles barefoot in the snow. Let me see." Ellie hesitated, then pulled off the wool socks. Caleb crouched down, and the sight made his stomach turn. Blisters on top of blisters, some burst, some swollen with fluid. The skin between her toes was split and weeping. 2 toenails on her left foot were black. Frostbite had started on her heels, the skin hard and waxy. "This hurt?" He pressed gently near her arch. "Some." "Some. Ellie, you've got frostbite. You need a doctor." "No doctor." The words came fast. "Doctors cost money. We won't be any trouble." "Stop saying that." He said it harder than he meant to. She flinched, and he softened his voice. "A doctor isn't trouble. A doctor is what you need. There's one in town. She's good." "She?" "Dr. Abigail Foster. Only woman doctor in the territory. Ruth trusted her. That's good enough for me." Ellie looked at him with those ancient eyes. "You're going to spend money on us." "Yeah, why?" "Because your feet are a mess and that baby needs a proper checkup. And because I can." He stood. "Storm's broken. Roads will be passable by afternoon. We'll go tomorrow morning." "I can work today. The barn needs mucking, and I saw your chicken coop's got a broken latch, and the pantry could use organizing and—" "Ellie." He waited until she met his eyes. "You don't have to earn tomorrow. Tomorrow's already yours." She stared at him like he'd spoken Chinese. Then she picked up the dishes and started washing them anyway, because that was the only language she knew. Work. Prove your worth. Make yourself too useful to throw away. Caleb let her. Some battles you couldn't win with words. Some battles took time. He spent the morning in the barn while Ellie cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. He could hear her through the walls, scrubbing, sweeping, reorganizing. Josie's happy babbling provided a soundtrack that made the old barn feel different. Not warmer exactly, but less empty. Tom Garrett, the ranch hand who came 3 times a week, showed up around noon. He stopped dead when he saw the small footprints in the snow between the house and the chicken coop. "You got company?" Tom asked, leaning against the barn door. "Something like that." Caleb told him the short version. Tom's face went through about 6 different expressions before settling on grim. "Laramie to here. In a blizzard. Barefoot. Yeah. With an infant. Yeah." Tom spat tobacco juice into the snow. "Who's the aunt?" "Harriet Crane." "Don't know her, but I know the type." Tom watched Ellie cross from the house to the chicken coop, Josie on her hip, moving with the efficiency of someone twice her age. "That child works like she's got the devil chasing her. She works like she thinks I'll put her out if she stops." "Will you?" Caleb looked at him hard. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind other people are going to ask." Tom met his eyes. "Single man, no wife, no kids, takes in 2 young girls. You know how that looks." "I know how it looks. I also know how it looked when I pulled a half-dead child out of the snow last night. People can think what they want." "I'm not saying you did wrong. I'm saying be careful. Get the law on your side before the law comes knocking on its own." Tom pushed off the doorframe. "This territory's got opinions about who raises whose children. Blood talks louder than good intentions." Caleb knew Tom was right. He hated that Tom was right. The next morning they rode into town. Ellie sat rigid on the wagon bench. Josie wrapped in 3 blankets against the cold. She hadn't spoken since they left the ranch, her eyes scanning the road like she expected trouble to come riding out of every tree line. "You all right?" Caleb asked. "People stare at me." "Nobody's staring. We're on an empty road." "They will in town. They always stare."
Aunt Harriet said it was because I looked like a charity case. You look like a kid who needs new boots. That's what we're getting after the doctor. You don't have to buy me boots."
"I know I don't have to. I want to." Ellie went quiet. Caleb could see her working that over in her head, trying to fit it into the framework she'd built, the one where everything came with a price and nothing was free. Dr. Abigail Foster's office sat above the general store on Main Street. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, who'd fought tooth and nail for her medical license in a territory that didn't think women belonged in doctoring. Ruth had loved her, said she was the only doctor in Montana who actually listened. Foster took one look at Ellie's feet, and her expression went flat. "How long ago did this happen?" 4 days, Caleb said. 4 days without treatment. Foster's voice was carefully neutral, the kind of neutral that meant she was furious underneath. "Bring her in. I need to examine both of them." The examination took an hour. Ellie sat still as stone while Foster cleaned her wounds, applied salve, wrapped her feet in proper bandages. Josie screamed through her checkup with the healthy fury of a baby who did not appreciate being poked. "The older girl is malnourished," Foster told Caleb in the hallway while Ellie dressed. "Not severely, but enough to tell me she hasn't been eating properly for months." She's small for 11. Her muscle development is behind. And those feet, the frostbite on her heels will heal, but 2 of those toenails are dead. They'll fall off. And the baby? Dehydrated when you found her, but recovering well. She's underweight by about 2 pounds for her age. Nothing that proper feeding won't fix. Foster crossed her arms. Now, you want to tell me how an 11-year-old and an infant ended up walking 40 miles through a blizzard? Caleb told her. All of it. Harriet Crane, Mr. Pemberton,
The bread and the frozen water jar, and the piece of paper with the mission's name on it. Foster's jaw tightened with each detail. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I'm going to write a medical report," she said, "documenting everything. The malnourishment, the frostbite, the dehydration. You're going to need it." "Need it for what?" "For when the aunt comes looking." Foster met his eyes. "And she will come looking. Women like that don't throw children away and then forget about them. They throw them away and then get angry when someone else picks them up. Why would she care? She didn't want them. She didn't want the burden, but she'll want the control. There's a difference." Foster uncrossed her arms. "Get a lawyer, Mr. Weston. Get one soon." They left the doctor's office and crossed the street to the general store. Caleb bought Ellie boots, wool ones, lined with sheepskin, the warmest the store had. He bought socks and a heavy coat, and a wool dress that was plain but sturdy. He bought milk for Josie and supplies for the ranch and a bar of chocolate that he slipped into the bag without Ellie seeing. At the counter, Martha Perkins, the shopkeeper's wife, watched them with open curiosity. "New additions to the Weston household?" she asked with a smile that was half friendly, half fishing. "Guests," Caleb said shortly. "Awful young guests." Martha's eyes lingered on Ellie. "Pretty little thing. She yours?" "She's hers." Caleb nodded toward Ellie, who stood by the window holding Josie, watching the street with the alertness of a deer near a clearing. "She belongs to herself." On the ride home, Ellie sat with the box of new boots in her lap, running her fingers over the leather like it was something holy. "Nobody ever bought me shoes before," she said quietly. "Aunt Harriet gave me her old ones. They were 3 sizes too big. I stuffed them with newspaper." "Well, these are yours, brand new, right size. What if I outgrow them? Then we'll buy new ones." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Ellie opened the box, pulled out one boot, and held it against her cheek. The leather was smooth and warm from sitting near the stove in the store. She closed her eyes, and something crossed her face that Caleb had to look away from, because it was too raw, too naked. The face of a child who'd been given something for the first time without being told what it cost. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "How long is temporary?" He'd been waiting for that question, dreading it. "I don't know yet." "Are you going to send us to the mission?" "No." "To another family?" "No." "Then what?" "I'm working on it." He flicked the reins, kept his eyes on the road. "Dr. Foster said I should get a lawyer, figure out the legal side of things." "Legal side meaning what?" "Meaning if I want you to stay, I need the law to agree." "And if the law doesn't agree?" "Then I'll make it agree." Ellie was quiet for a long time. Josie fussed, and she rocked her automatically, the motion so practiced it was unconscious. "Aunt Harriet is our blood," Ellie said finally. "The law cares about blood. The law also cares about a woman who put 2 children out in a blizzard." "Does it? Because nobody came looking for us. No sheriff, no church, no anybody. She put us out and the world just kept going like we didn't exist." Caleb didn't have an answer for that. She was right. The world had kept going. Doors had stayed shut,
People had looked through windows and turned away. The system that was supposed to protect children like Ellie and Josie had failed them at every single level. "That changes now," he said. "How?" "Because now someone's paying attention." When they got home, Caleb found something waiting at the gate, a basket covered with a cloth sitting in the snow. He picked it up, pulled back the cloth. Fresh bread, a jar of preserves, and a note in careful handwriting. "Heard you had company. Figured you could use some provisions. Come see me when you're ready. I've got a milk goat and more opinions than sense." It was signed Agnes Whitfield. "Who's Agnes Whitfield?" Ellie asked, peering at the note. "My nearest neighbor, 5 miles west. She's been trying to feed me since Ruth died. I kept turning her down." "Why?" "Because accepting food from people means letting them in, and I wasn't letting anybody in." Ellie looked at him with understanding that no 11-year-old should have. "But you let us in?" "Yeah." Caleb carried the basket inside. "Guess I did." That evening, they ate Agnes's bread, with the preserves and the last of the venison. Josie sat in a makeshift high chair, Ellie's engineering, a crate turned upside down on a regular chair with blankets packed around it, and banged a wooden spoon against the table with furious joy. "She's getting louder," Caleb said. "She's getting stronger." Ellie smiled, and it transformed her entire face. For a second, she looked like what she was supposed to be. A child. Just a child. Safe and fed and warm. "She's always been loud when she's happy. Aunt Harriet hated it." "I don't hate it." "I know." Ellie tore a piece of bread for herself. "That's how I know this is different." After dinner, Caleb sat on the porch despite the cold. The sky had cleared to a deep black, scattered with stars. His breath came out in clouds. Inside, he could hear Ellie washing dishes, humming something to Josie. He thought about what Tom had said, about how it looked, about blood talking louder than good intentions. He thought about Foster's warning. She will come looking. He thought about Ruth. What she would do. What she would say. She'd say, "Stop thinking and start doing, you stubborn fool." She'd say, "Those children need you, and you need them, and the rest is just details." He went inside, sat at the kitchen table and pulled out paper and ink. He wrote 2 letters. One to Henry Blackwood, the lawyer in town who'd handled Ruth's estate. One to his son Daniel at the copper mine in Butte. The letter to Blackwood was business. Guardianship petition, legal protection, whatever it took. The letter to Daniel was harder. He stared at the blank page for 10 minutes before the words came. "Daniel, I know you're still angry. I know you got reason to be. But something happened, and I need to tell you about it, even if you don't want to hear from me. There are 2 children in this house tonight. 2 girls who lost everything and walked through hell to get here. I opened the door for them. Your mother would have opened it sooner. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to know that this house isn't dead anymore. That maybe there's still something here worth coming back to. Your father." He sealed both letters and left them on the table for the morning post. Ellie appeared in the doorway. Josie was asleep against her shoulder, milk-drunk and peaceful. "She's out," Ellie whispered. "Fed her 3 times today. She's making up for lost time." "Good. That's real good." Caleb looked at this girl standing in his doorway, his dead wife's sewing room upstairs, his dead wife's socks on her feet, his dead wife's kitchen warming with the smell of bread and life. "Ellie." "Yeah?" "Tomorrow I'm going to see a lawyer. Start the process of making this official." "Official meaning?" "Meaning you stay, for real, not temporary." Ellie's face went still. Her arms tightened around Josie.
What if Aunt Harriet fights it?
Let her fight.
She will. She's mean, and she's stubborn, and she'll say terrible things about you and about me.
I've heard terrible things before. I was at Antietam. Ain't much a woman from Laramie can say that's worse than cannon fire.
The corner of Ellie's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close.
You're really going to do this?
Already decided.
When?
When I heard Josie cry at 3 a.m. Caleb's voice roughened. Strongest sound I've heard in 2 years. Made me remember what it feels like when there's something in this house worth fighting for. Ellie's eyes shone. She blinked hard, once, twice, refusing to cry.
We won't let you down.
I know you won't.
And we won't be any.
Ellie, if you say trouble one more time, I'm going to make you eat your boots. She laughed, a real laugh, short and startled and rusty from disuse, but real. Josie stirred at the sound, and Ellie pressed her lips to the baby's head to quiet her.
Good night, Caleb.
Good night, Ellie. She turned and climbed the stairs.
He listened to her footsteps cross the landing, heard the sewing room door close gently, and sat alone in the kitchen with the letters on the table and the fire dying in the stove, and the feeling that something enormous had shifted under his feet. Not an earthquake, more like a thaw. The slow, terrifying, unstoppable breaking of ice that had held everything frozen for 2 years. He looked at Ruth's photograph one more time. I think you'd like her, he said quietly. I think you'd like both of them. The photograph smiled back the way it always did, unchanged. But tonight, for the first time, it didn't make him want to drink. It made him want to get up early and make breakfast before Ellie could beat him to the stove. He banked the fire, checked the doors, and climbed the stairs to his room. As he passed the sewing room, he heard Ellie's voice, barely a whisper, talking to Josie in the dark.
We're safe, Josie. We're really safe.
He opened the door, and he's not going to close it. I know it. I can feel it. Caleb stood in the hallway and pressed his hand flat against the wall. Then he went to bed and slept through the night for the first time in 2 years. 3 weeks changed everything and nothing. The ranch woke up. That was the only way Caleb could describe it. Rooms that had been closed got opened. Windows that had been shuttered got light. The kitchen smelled like bread and coffee every morning because Ellie was up before dawn, no matter how many times he told her to sleep in. She'd taken over the chickens completely. The birds had been laying poorly for months, sullen and irritable under Caleb's indifferent care. Within a week of Ellie talking to them, feeding them scraps, letting Josie toddle near the coop so the hens had something to be curious about, production doubled.
You got a gift with animals, Caleb told her one morning, watching her coax an egg from under the most stubborn hen on the property.
Mama said animals know when somebody cares. They can feel it.
Ellie tucked the egg into her basket. These chickens were lonely, that's all.
Lonely chickens.
Everything gets lonely, Caleb, even chickens. He couldn't argue with the results. Agnes Whitfield came by on the 4th day, driving her wagon through the snow with the determination of a woman who'd survived 40 Montana winters and wasn't about to let the 41st slow her down. She brought milk from her goat, a wool blanket she'd knitted herself, and enough opinions to fill a courthouse. So this is the girl. Agnes stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, studying Ellie with sharp blue eyes. You're smaller than I expected.
Yes, ma'am.
Ellie stood straight, Josie on her hip, chin lifted, ready to be judged. Agnes crossed to her, looked at Josie, and her weathered face softened.
Pretty baby. She eating well?
3 times a day now, getting stronger.
Good. Goat's milk is best for babies who've been poorly. I'll bring some every week.
Agnes turned to Caleb.
You look better.
Better than what?
Better than the walking corpse you've been for 2 years.
She said it flat, the way only old friends can say hard truths.
Ruth would be glad.
Don't start, Agnes.
I'm not starting. I'm stating facts.
She pulled a chair out and sat down uninvited.
Now, tell me about this aunt.
Caleb told her. Agnes listened without interrupting, her face going darker with each detail. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment.
Harriet Crane, Agnes said slowly. I've heard that name. She does sewing work for some of the ranchers' wives near Laramie. Pleasant enough when she wants something. Cold as a snake when she doesn't.
You know her?
I know of her.
And I know George Pemberton. He's a weasel in a waistcoat, owns the biggest store in Laramie, and thinks that makes him royalty.
Agnes looked at Ellie.
She threw you out because of him?
Yes, ma'am.
And now she'll come wanting you back because losing you makes her look bad.
Ellie blinked.
How did you know that?
Because I've been alive 60 years, child, and I've met every kind of cruel there is. The ones who throw you away, and the ones who come back to collect what they threw. Agnes stood, smoothed her skirt. Caleb, you get that lawyer yet? Letter went out yesterday.
Good. Make sure he's mean. You'll need mean when that woman shows up.
She patted Ellie's shoulder as she passed.
You're safe here, girl. This man's too stubborn to let anything happen to you. And if he falters, I'm 5 miles west with a shotgun, and no patience for fools.
Ellie almost smiled.
Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield. Agnes. Mrs. Whitfield was my mother-in-law, and she was a horror.
After Agnes left, Ellie stood at the window, watching the wagon disappear down the road.
She's nice, she said quietly. Scary, but nice.
That's Agnes. She was Ruth's closest friend, only person who kept coming by after Ruth died. I turned her away every time. She kept coming anyway.
Why'd you turn her away?
Because I wanted to be alone.
Do you still?
Caleb looked at her. This girl standing in his kitchen with his dead wife's friend's blanket over her shoulders, and his dead wife's socks on her bandaged feet, and a baby on her hip who laughed at chickens. No, he said. I don't. Henry Blackwood's reply came the following Tuesday. A short letter in precise handwriting, requesting a meeting at his office in town. Caleb rode in alone, leaving Ellie and Josie with Agnes, who'd volunteered to stay at the ranch for the afternoon. Blackwood's office was above the bank, a small room stuffed with law books and the smell of pipe tobacco. The lawyer himself was a tall man in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the slow, deliberate manner of someone who weighed every word before spending it. He'd served in the Confederate Army and come west to escape the wreckage of everything he'd believed in. Ruth had trusted him. That was enough for Caleb. Sit down, Blackwood said. Tell me everything. Caleb talked for 30 minutes straight. Blackwood listened, making occasional notes, his face giving nothing away. When Caleb finished, the lawyer set down his pen. You want guardianship. I want them safe. That's not the same thing, legally. Blackwood leaned back. Guardianship means the court declares you responsible for these children. It means the aunt's claim is either terminated or suspended. It means a judge has to look at the facts and decide that a widowed rancher with no blood connection is a better option than a blood relative. She nearly killed them. Prove it. The doctor examined them. Malnourished. Frostbitten. Dehydrated. Good. Medical records are strong evidence. What else? Ellie's testimony. She can tell the judge exactly what happened. She's 11. The court may consider her testimony unreliable, or they'll say you coached her. Blackwood tapped his pen against the desk. What about witnesses? Anyone see the aunt put them out? Nobody that I know of. Anyone see the children on the road? Anyone they asked for help?
Ellie knocked on 4 or 5 doors. Nobody answered, except one woman who shut the door in her face. "Do you know who?" "Farm with a red barn, 10 miles south. The Hendersons."
Mary Henderson. Blackwood wrote the name down. She'd be a useful witness if she'd testify to turning away 2 children in a blizzard. Shows the community failed these girls. Makes your intervention look even more necessary. I don't want to use other people's guilt to win. This isn't about want. This is about strategy. Blackwood fixed him with a level stare.
Mr. Weston, I'll be honest with you. The law favors blood. Always has. A widowed man with no family taking in 2 young girls. Some folks will question your motives. Let them question. They will. And the aunt's lawyer will make sure the judge questions them too. Blackwood stood, walked to the window. I knew Ruth. She was a good woman. Best kind. If she were alive, there'd be no question. A married couple taking in orphans, that's Christian charity. A single man doing it? That's suspicious. Suspicious of what? You know what. Caleb felt heat flood his face. That's a damn lie before it's even spoken. I know that. You know that. But the aunt will use it. Blackwood turned from the window. So here's what we do. We build a case so strong that no judge can rule against us without looking like a fool. Medical records, character witnesses, documentation of how the children have improved under your care. And time.
The longer those girls thrive with you, the harder it is to justify taking them away.
How much time? 3 months minimum before we file. 6 would be better. We want a clear record of sustained care. What if the aunt shows up before then? She will show up. Count on it. When she does, you stay calm. You don't threaten, you don't prevent her from seeing the children, but you don't hand them over either. Let her make the mistakes. Women like Harriet Crane can't help themselves. Give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves. Caleb hated the cold logic of it. Hated thinking of Ellie and Josie as pieces in a legal chess game. But he understood the necessity. What about the mission in Douglas? The one Harriet sent them to? Good thought. I'll write to them. If they have no record of expecting these children, it proves Harriet sent them out with no real plan. That's negligence at best, abandonment at worst. Blackwood walked him to the door. One more thing. You mentioned a son. Daniel. He's in Butte. Get him home if you can. A family unit, even an imperfect one, looks better than a man alone. A judge sees a father and son together. He sees stability. He sees future. Daniel's not speaking to me. Then make him speak to you. Write again. Keep writing until he answers, or you run out of ink. Caleb rode home with the lawyer's words circling in his head. Build a case. Document everything. Give her rope. Get Daniel home. When he arrived, he found Agnes on the porch, looking worried. What happened? Caleb dismounted fast. Nothing bad, but the girl had a spell. Agnes kept her voice low. Found her in the kitchen about an hour ago, scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees. Hands raw. Crying. Wouldn't stop. Said she missed a spot under the table, and if you came home and found it dirty, you'd send them away. Caleb's chest tightened. Where is she now? Upstairs. Got her calmed down eventually. Fed her some soup. She's sleeping. And Josie? In the basket beside her, happy as can be. That baby's got no idea what's happening, and God bless her for it. Agnes gathered her things and touched Caleb's arm as she passed. That child's got wounds you can't see, Caleb. The feet will heal. The rest is going to take a lot longer. After Agnes left, Caleb climbed the stairs. The sewing room door was open a crack. He pushed it gently. Ellie was curled on the bed, Josie sleeping beside her.
Her hands were red and cracked, the skin on her knuckles split. He pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down. Waited. Ellie's eyes opened after a few minutes. She saw him and immediately tried to sit up. "I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. You don't have to apologize. The floor had a stain, and I couldn't get it out, and I kept scrubbing, and then I couldn't stop, and I thought if you saw it, you'd think I wasn't useful anymore, and—" "Ellie, stop." She stopped. Her breathing was ragged. "Look at your hands," he said it gently. "Look what you did to yourself." She looked. The skin was raw, bleeding in places. She stared at her hands like they belonged to someone else. "Aunt Harriet used to check the floors," she whispered. "She'd run her finger along the baseboards. If she found dust, she'd make me do the whole house over. Once she found a spot under the stove, and she didn't let me eat dinner." "You're not at Aunt Harriet's anymore." "I know that. I know it here." She touched her head. "But I don't know it here." She put her hand over her heart. "My body doesn't know it yet. My hands just start moving, and I can't make them stop." Caleb reached over and took her damaged hands in his. "Then I'll stop them for you. Every time. Until your body catches up with your head." "What if it never does?" "It will. It just takes time." "How much time?" "As much as you need." Ellie's face crumpled. "I don't want to be broken." "You're not broken. You're hurt. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Broken means it can't be fixed. Hurt means it's healing. And you're healing, Ellie. Every day. Even when it doesn't feel like it." She squeezed his hands and nodded. Josie stirred beside her, making small sounds in her sleep. For a while, they sat in the quiet, the late afternoon light coming through Ruth's window, dust motes drifting in the gold. "Caleb." "Yeah?" "What did the lawyer say?" "Said we've got a fight ahead of us, but a winnable one." "Winnable meaning we might not win. Winnable meaning we will if we do this right." "And doing it right means what?" "Building a case, getting witnesses, showing the court that you're better off here." "I am better off here." "I know. Now we just have to prove it to a judge." Ellie was quiet for a moment. "Will I have to see her again? In court?" "Probably." "Will I have to talk? Tell them what she did?" "If you're willing." "I'm willing." Her voice hardened. "I'll tell them everything about the cooking and the cleaning and the cold barn and Josie's fever and the bread and the walking. All of it." "You sure? It won't be easy." "Nothing's been easy since Mama died." Ellie sat up straighter. "But this is worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for." Something moved through Caleb's chest that he couldn't name. He cleared his throat and stood. "I'm going to make dinner tonight. You're going to sit on the porch and do absolutely nothing." "I don't know how to do nothing." "Time you learned." She laughed, small and reluctant, but real. The next 2 weeks settled into a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Ellie went to see Dr. Foster twice more, and her feet improved steadily. The frostbite healed. The dead toenails fell off, and new ones started growing underneath. Foster documented everything with the meticulous care of someone building an arsenal. Caleb wrote to Daniel again. Shorter this time. No begging, just facts. The older girl's name is Ellie. She's 11. She cooked me breakfast the first morning, and it was better than anything I've made in 2 years. She talks to the chickens, and they listen. She scrubs the floors until her hands bleed, because she's terrified I'll throw her out if she misses a spot. The baby's name is Josie. She laughs at everything. She took her first steps yesterday. 3 of them before she fell, and she didn't even cry. Just got back up and tried again. Your mother would have loved them, Daniel. She would have loved every minute of this.
I wish you could see it." No response came. Caleb sent the letter anyway and waited. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in the second week of January, Caleb heard hoofbeats approaching from the south road. He was in the barn, mending harness, when the sound reached him. Fast, purposeful, the kind of riding that meant someone was coming for something specific. His stomach dropped. He set down the harness and walked to the barn door. A buckboard came over the rise, 2 horses driving hard through the snow. A woman at the reins, dressed in black despite the cold. A man beside her, thin, nervous, his hands gripping the seat rail. Caleb knew who she was before the wagon reached the gate. He walked to the house. Ellie was in the kitchen, Josie in her high chair, both of them covered in flour from an ambitious attempt at biscuits. She looked up at the sound of his boots and saw his face. The color drained from hers. "She's here," Ellie whispered. "Isn't she?" "Get Josie. Go upstairs." "No." "Ellie." "No." Ellie wiped flour from her hands, picked up Josie, and stood straight. "I'm not hiding. Not anymore. Not from her." Caleb looked at this girl, 11 years old, flour on her face, a baby on her hip, standing in his kitchen with her jaws set and her eyes burning, and more courage in her small body than most men carried in a lifetime. "All right," he said, "then stay behind me." He walked out onto the porch. Ellie followed, Josie pressed close against her chest. The wagon pulled up to the gate and stopped. The woman climbed down with sharp, practiced movements. She was tall, thin, her face carved into angles by bitterness and cold weather. Her eyes swept the property, the house, the porch, and landed on Ellie like a hawk spotting prey. "Mr. Weston," her voice cut through the winter air. "I'm Harriet Crane. I believe you have my nieces." Caleb stepped to the edge of the porch. "I know who you are." "Then you know I've come for what's mine." "They're not yours. They're not property." Harriet's mouth thinned. "They're my blood. My sister's children. The law says they belong with family. The law also says you don't put children out in a blizzard to die." "I did no such thing." Harriet's voice was clipped, rehearsed. "I provided them with provisions and directions to a charitable mission." The older girl was always willful. She must have wandered off course. Behind him, Caleb heard Ellie make a sound. Small, furious. "You gave her half a loaf of bread and a jar of water that froze in 3 hours, Caleb said, keeping his voice level. "No shoes, no coat, in December. The baby was hours from dying when they reached me." "Children exaggerate." "The doctor didn't exaggerate. I've got medical records, frostbite, malnutrition, dehydration, all documented." Something flickered in Harriet's eyes. The first crack. The thin man climbed down from the wagon. He shifted from foot to foot, uncomfortable. "Harriet, maybe we should—" "Quiet, George." George Pemberton, the man behind it all. Caleb looked at him and felt nothing but contempt. A man who'd let 2 children be thrown into a killing storm because they inconvenienced his courtship. "You brought your suitor," Caleb said. "That's bold." "Mr. Pemberton is my fiancé." Harriet lifted her chin. "We're to be married in the spring. We'll provide a proper home for the girls. A real family." "You weren't family when you threw them out." "I made a mistake born of desperation. I'm here to correct it." "You're here because it looks bad." Caleb crossed his arms. "A woman puts out her dead sister's children, and then the whole territory finds out about it. That's not the kind of reputation a general store owner's wife wants." Harriet's face flushed dark red. "How dare you?" "I dare because I pulled those girls out of the snow. I dare because the baby's heart was barely beating. I dare because Ellie's feet were so torn up she couldn't walk for a week."
Ellie.
Harriet's eyes locked on the girl behind him. Her voice changed, softened into something sweet and poisonous.
Ellie, darling, come here. Let me see you.
Ellie didn't move.
Ellie, I know you're upset with me. I understand. But things are different now. George and we're going to have a real home, a proper home. There'll be a room for you and the baby. You won't have to work so hard. It'll be better, I promise.
You promised Mama you'd take care of us. Ellie's voice was steady and cold.
You promised her on her deathbed.
Harriet's composure cracked for a half-second.
I tried, Ellie. I did my best. Your best was sending us to die.
That's not what happened.
Yes, it is.
Ellie stepped out from behind Caleb. Josie clung to her sister, eyes wide.
You gave me bread and water and told me to walk north. You didn't give me shoes. You didn't give me a coat. You said if I came back, you'd have me arrested. And then you shut the door.
You're twisting things. You always twist things.
I'm telling the truth. Same truth I'll tell the judge.
The word judge hit Harriet like a slap. Her eyes snapped to Caleb.
You're taking this to court.
Already filed the petition.
On what grounds?
Abandonment, neglect, endangerment of minors. Take your pick. Harriet's hands curled into fists at her sides. Pemberton touched her arm, and she shook him off.
You'll never win.
You're a stranger, a single man with no wife, no family, no standing. The court will see right through you. Maybe, but they'll also see right through you. And I've got medical records, character witnesses, and the testimony of an 11-year-old girl who walked 40 miles through a blizzard because her aunt chose a man over 2 children. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Pemberton spoke up, his voice thin and ready. Harriet, perhaps we should go through proper channels. This isn't productive. I said be quiet, George.
Mrs. Crane, Caleb said, and his voice was low and hard and final. You can leave now. You can come back with a court order and a sheriff, and we'll handle this through the law. But you're not taking these children off my property today. This isn't over. No, it's not. But the next chapter happens in a courtroom, not on my porch. Harriet stared at him, then at Ellie, then at Josie, who had buried her face in Ellie's neck. Something moved across Harriet's face, too fast to read. Regret, maybe. Or just the fury of a woman who'd lost control of a situation she thought she owned. You'll regret this, Harriet said. Those girls are nothing but trouble. The older one's got a mouth on her, and the baby will bleed you dry. You'll see. I've seen enough already, Caleb said, and I don't regret a thing. Harriet turned on her heel, climbed back into the wagon, and snapped the reins so hard the horses lurched. Pemberton scrambled up beside her as the buckboard wheeled around and drove back the way it came. Caleb watched until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he turned around. Ellie stood on the porch, Josie in her arms, shaking from head to foot. But her eyes were dry, and her chin was up, and she hadn't moved an inch. She's going to fight dirty, Ellie said. I know. She's going to say things about you, about why you want us here. She'll make it sound... I know what she'll make it sound like. Are you scared? Yeah. He didn't see the point in line. But I was scared at Antietam, too, and I made it through. What's Antietam? A battle. A bad one. Worst day of my life, until the day Ruth died. Ellie reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were small and cold and still shaking, but her grip was iron. We're going to win, she said. I don't know how yet, but we're going to win, because we have to. Because Josie deserves a home, and you deserve a family, and I'm not going back to her. I'm not. I'd rather walk another 40 miles in the snow. You're not walking anywhere. Caleb squeezed her hand. Not anymore. They stood on the porch together as the last of the winter sun bled out behind the mountains. Josie reached up and grabbed Caleb's collar, pulled herself close to him, and laid her head against his chest, with the absolute trust of a child who decided this was where she belonged. Caleb held still. Let the weight settle. Let it fill the hollow place that had been empty for 2 years. Behind them, the house waited. Warm, lit, alive. And somewhere on the road south, a woman in black was already planning her next move. Harriet didn't wait long. The sheriff came on a Thursday, 8 days after she'd stood at Caleb's gate making threats. Caleb was splitting wood behind the barn when he heard the hoofbeats. Single rider, steady pace, not rushed, but purposeful. He set down the axe and walked around front. Sheriff Jack Tierney sat on his horse at the fence line, his badge catching what little winter sun broke through the clouds. He was a broad man with tired eyes and a reputation for doing the right thing, even when the right thing was complicated. Caleb. Jack. Wish this were social. But it ain't. No. Tierney dismounted, tied his horse, and leaned against the fence. Got a formal complaint from Harriet Crane. Says you're holding her nieces against their will.
Says you've refused access and threatened her person.
The threatening part's a lie. The rest is close enough to true, depending on how you look at it.
How do you look at it?
I look at it like 2 children walked 40 miles through a killing storm because that woman threw them out. I look at it like the baby was dying when I found them. I look at it like I've got medical records proving neglect and the lawyer filing for guardianship. Tierney pulled off his hat and rubbed his forehead. I know all that. Heard the story from Agnes Whitfield. Heard it from Doc Foster. Heard it from half the town, actually. People talk. Then you know I didn't steal those children. They came to me. I know. And between you and me, I think Harriet Crane's got the warmth of a January grave. But I've got a job, Caleb. She's filed a formal complaint. I can't ignore it. So what are you telling me? I'm telling you she wants a welfare check. She wants me to verify the children are here and that they're being properly cared for. And she wants access. No. It's not a request. Then make it an order. Get a court order saying I have to hand them over, and I'll comply. Until then, they stay. Tierney studied him for a long moment. You know I could arrest you for obstruction. You could try. I don't want to try. I want to solve this without anybody ending up in irons. Tierney replaced his hat. Here's what I can do. I can tell Harriet I conducted a welfare check and found the children healthy and well cared for. That buys you time. But Caleb, she's going to petition the court. She's got a lawyer from Cheyenne, man named Cornelius Webb. Expensive, sharp. The kind who wins cases that should be lost. I've got Henry Blackwood. Blackwood's good, but Webb's a snake. And snakes win more than they should. Tierney mounted his horse. Get your house in order. When this goes before a judge, everything matters. How those girls look, how they talk, how you look standing next to them. Everything. How much time do I have? Court date set for March 15th. 6 weeks. Caleb felt the ground shift under him. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to build a case that would keep 2 children safe. 6 weeks before Harriet Crane walked into a courtroom and tried to take back what she'd thrown away. Jack. The sheriff turned in his saddle. Those girls, if you'd seen them that night. The baby wasn't making sounds anymore. Ellie's feet were raw meat. They were dying on my doorstep. I believe you. Then help me. Tierney was quiet. Then he said, I'll make sure my report to the court reflects what I've seen here today. Healthy children, clean home, adequate care. That's the best I can do inside the law. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. He rode away. Caleb stood at the fence and watched him go, then turned toward the house.
Ellie was at the window. She'd seen everything. He went inside.
6 weeks,
Ellie said before he could speak.
You heard?
I heard enough. March 15th.
That's when we go before the judge.
And Aunt Harriet's got an expensive lawyer.
We've got Blackwood. He's smart.
Smart enough?
We'll find out. Caleb sat down across from her.
Ellie, I need you to do something for me. Something hard.
What?
I need you to write down everything that happened at your aunt's house. Everything you remember. The cooking, the cleaning, the cold barn, Josie's fever, the night she put you out. All of it. Every detail. Ellie's face went pale, but her jaw set.
I can do that.
It might hurt to remember.
It hurts more to forget, because forgetting means it didn't matter. And it mattered.
Caleb nodded. You'll also have to say it out loud. In court. In front of a judge. In front of strangers. In front of her.
I know.
Are you sure you can do that? Ellie looked at Josie, who was on the floor, chewing a wooden spoon with focused determination. I walked 40 miles to keep her alive. Talking in a room full of people isn't harder than that. The next 6 weeks were the longest of Caleb's life. He threw himself into building the case with the same relentless energy he'd once put into building the ranch. He rode to town 3 times a week to meet with Blackwood. They went over every detail, anticipated every argument, prepared for every angle Webb might take. Blackwood was thorough. He wrote to the mission in Douglas and got confirmation that no Hale children had ever been expected or registered. The mission director added a note, calling the situation unconscionable. He gathered character witnesses: Agnes Whitfield, Tom Garrett, Dr. Foster, the pastor at the Methodist Church who'd known Ruth and vouched for Caleb's moral fiber. We need more, Blackwood said during their 4th meeting. Medical evidence is strong. Character witnesses are solid. But the aunt has blood rights and a fancy lawyer. We need something that shows the court this isn't just charity, that these children have a real future with you. What kind of something? Family. A judge sees a single man, he sees risk. He sees a family, he sees stability. I don't have family. I've got a son who won't speak to me. Then make him speak to you. Caleb wrote to Daniel a 3rd time. He didn't beg, didn't plead, just wrote the truth. Daniel, court date is March 15th. I'm fighting for 2 children who need a home. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to stand in a courtroom and show a judge that this house can be a family again. If you ever loved your mother, do this for what she believed in. She believed that helping people was the whole point of being alive. I still believe that too. 2 weeks before the hearing, a letter arrived. Caleb's hands shook as he opened it. I'm coming. Not for you, for them, and for Ma. I'll be there March 14th. Daniel. Caleb read it twice, folded it carefully, and put it in his shirt pocket next to his heart. Ellie found him on the porch that evening, staring at nothing. Good news or bad news? She asked. Daniel's coming. Your son? Yeah. The one who blames you for his mother's death. That's the one. Ellie sat down beside him. Josie was inside with Agnes, who'd taken to spending afternoons at the ranch. Are you scared? Terrified. Of the court or of seeing him? Both. What if he's still angry? He will be. Angry doesn't go away in 6 weeks.
No, Ellie said quietly. It doesn't. But sometimes angry people show up anyway. And showing up is what matters.
Daniel arrived the day before the hearing. He rode in from the north on a horse that looked as worn out as its rider. 3 years had changed him. Harder. Thinner. The boyishness burned away by mine work and bitterness and whatever demons he'd been wrestling in Butte. Caleb met him at the gate. They stood on opposite sides of the fence, father and son, with 3 years of silence and blame between them. "You came," Caleb said. "Said I would." "I know, but saying and doing aren't always the same thing." "No, they're not." Daniel looked past him toward the house. "They inside?" "Kitchen. Ellie's cooking. She always cooks when she's nervous." "Is she nervous?" "She's 11 years old, and tomorrow she's got to stand in front of a judge and tell him the worst things that ever happened to her." "Yeah, she's nervous." Daniel dismounted and tied his horse. They walked to the house in silence. Caleb opened the door, and the smell hit them both. Bread, coffee, something with cinnamon. The smell of a house that was lived in, loved in. Ellie stood at the stove, Josie in her high chair, flour on her apron and steel in her eyes. She looked at Daniel, and he looked at her, and for a moment, nobody spoke. "You must be Daniel," Ellie said. "And you're Ellie." "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir. I work for a living." The corner of his mouth twitched. "My father tells me you make better porridge than he does." "A fence post makes better porridge than he does." Daniel laughed, short, surprised, and real. Caleb watched his son's face change and felt something loosen in his chest that had been clenched for 3 years. They ate dinner together, awkward at first, stilted. But Josie broke the tension the way babies do, by grabbing Daniel's nose when he leaned too close and refusing to let go. Daniel's laugh filled the kitchen, and Ellie smiled, and Caleb sat at the head of the table and thought, this is what Ruth wanted. This is what she always wanted. A full table, a warm house, people who needed each other. After dinner, Daniel helped with dishes. He and Ellie stood side by side at the basin, and Caleb heard his son asking questions. About the walk, about the storm, about Harriet. Ellie answered each one honestly, without drama, without self-pity. Just facts. When she finished, Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're tougher than me." "I doubt that." "I left because I was angry. You left because you had to. There's a difference." Daniel dried his hands. "I'll testify tomorrow, whatever you need me to say." "Just tell the truth." "The truth about what?" "About what you see here. About whether this feels like a home." Daniel looked around the kitchen, the flour on the counter, the baby in the high chair, the photograph of Ruth on the mantel, smiling at all of them. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It does." That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He found Ellie on the porch in her nightgown, wrapped in a quilt, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too scared." She pulled the quilt tighter. "What if the judge takes her side? Then we appeal. What if the appeal fails? Then we appeal again. What if everything fails? Then I'll think of something else. I'm not giving up." "Promise?" "Promise." Ellie was quiet for a moment. "Caleb, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I used to pray every night at Aunt Harriet's. I'd pray for God to send somebody to help us, somebody who cared. And nobody came. Night after night, nobody came. And I started thinking maybe God wasn't listening. Maybe nobody was listening. Maybe Josie and I just didn't matter enough." "Ellie." "But then I knocked on your door." Her voice broke. "And you came outside in a blizzard with a rifle.
And you picked us up. And you brought us inside. And you didn't ask for anything. You just helped." She wiped her eyes. So maybe God was listening. Maybe it just took him a while to find the right door. Caleb put his arm around her and pulled her close. This child who'd lost everything and still believed. This child who'd walked through fire and come out the other side with her faith bruised, but not broken. "Maybe so," he said. "Maybe so." Morning came sharp and cold. They dressed in their best. Caleb in the suit he'd worn to Ruth's funeral. Ellie in a blue dress Agnes had sewn for the occasion. Josie in a tiny outfit Dr. Foster had brought by. Daniel in a clean shirt with his hair combed for the first time in what looked like years. The ride to town was quiet. Ellie sat between Caleb and Daniel on the wagon bench, Josie in her lap, her face pale but set. She'd braided her hair with painful precision. She looked exactly like what she was, a child trying to be brave in a world that had given her every reason not to be. The courthouse was crowded. Word had spread. Small towns fed on spectacle, and a widowed rancher fighting a blood relative for 2 orphan girls was the kind of story that brought people out in the cold. Caleb saw faces in the crowd. Agnes, fierce and upright. Tom Garrett, nodding once. Dr. Foster, with her medical bag like a weapon. The pastor and his wife. Mary Henderson near the back, her face a mask of guilt. And there, on the left side of the courtroom, Harriet Crane. Black dress, severe bonnet. Her face composed into wounded dignity. Beside her, Cornelius Webb, a thin man with sharp features and an expensive suit. And behind them, George Pemberton, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Blackwood met them at the door. "Morrison's presiding. He's fair but traditional, values blood ties. We need to be perfect today." "We will be," Ellie said. Blackwood looked down at her, and something crossed his face. Respect, maybe. "Yes," he said. "I believe you will." They took their seats. The judge entered. An older man with iron-gray hair and the expression of someone who'd heard every sad story the territory had to offer and expected to hear another. Webb went first, smooth, polished. He painted Harriet as a grieving woman who'd made a desperate choice out of poverty and was now seeking to reunite her family. He called her to the stand, and she performed beautifully. Tears at the right moments. A trembling voice when she described her love for her nieces. A careful, rehearsed account of how she'd provided provisions and directions and never meant for the children to come to harm. Blackwood's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Crane, you testified you gave the children provisions. What exactly did you provide?" "Bread, water, directions." "How much bread?" "Half a loaf." "And water?" "1 jar." 1 jar of water for 2 children traveling 60 miles in December. Blackwood let the words hang. "Did you provide shoes?" "She had shoes." "Your niece arrived at Mr. Weston's ranch barefoot, Mrs. Crane, with frostbite on both feet." "She must have lost them on the road." "Did you provide a coat?" "I gave her a shawl." "A cotton shawl in a Montana blizzard." "I gave what I had." "You gave what was convenient." Blackwood pulled a paper from his folder. "I have here a letter from the Douglas Mission. They have no record of expecting these children. No advance notice, no arrangements. Did you contact them before sending a 10-year-old on a 60-mile journey?" "I assumed they'd take anyone in need." "You assumed, but you didn't verify." Blackwood paused. "Mrs. Crane, isn't it true that you asked the children to leave because your fiancé, Mr. Pemberton, expressed reluctance about marrying a woman with dependents?" Harriet's composure cracked.
That's not. George loves children. Mr. Pemberton told you, and I quote from your niece's written statement, that he wouldn't marry a woman saddled with someone else's orphans. 2 days later, you put those children out. Is that accurate? She's lying. That child has always been a liar. Is she? Because Mr.
Pemberton is sitting right there, and he's gone very pale, which suggests your niece isn't lying at all. Every head in the courtroom turned to Pemberton, who looked like a man watching his reputation collapse in real time. Mrs. Crane, Blackwood said quietly, you didn't send those children away because you couldn't afford them. You sent them away because they were inconvenient, because a man you wanted to marry saw them as baggage, and you chose him over 2 children your dying sister entrusted to your care. Objection! Webb was on his feet. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. Mr. Blackwood, keep to questions. No further questions, Your Honor. Harriet returned to her seat with her face rigid and her hands shaking. Webb whispered something to her, and she shook him off. Blackwood called his witnesses. Dr. Foster testified to the medical evidence. Methodical, devastating, inarguable. Tom Garrett spoke to Caleb's character and the transformation of the ranch. Agnes Whitfield told the court she'd known Caleb Weston for 15 years and Ruth Weston for 12, and that those children were loved and cared for, and anyone who couldn't see that was a fool. Daniel took the stand. He was nervous, his hands gripping the armrests, but his voice was steady. I left this ranch 3 years ago because I blamed my father for my mother's death, he said. I was wrong to blame him, but I was grieving, and grief makes you mean. I came back because he asked me to, because he told me about 2 children who needed a home. And when I walked into that kitchen and saw what he'd built, what they'd built together, I knew my mother would have been proud. She would have opened that door faster than any of us. She would have fought harder. But my father's doing it. He's doing exactly what she would have done. And that matters. Then Blackwood called Ellie. She walked to the stand on legs that trembled but held. She was sworn in. She sat in the chair that was too big for her and folded her hands in her lap and looked at the judge. Miss Morgan, Blackwood said gently, can you tell the court what happened at your aunt's house? Ellie told them everything. The cooking, the cleaning, the cold barn where she sat with the sick baby while Harriet entertained her suitor, the slaps when dinner was late, the day Harriet handed her a piece of bread and told her to walk, the 3 doors that stayed shut, the snow that buried the road until she couldn't tell north from south, Josie going silent. She told it flat, without drama, without tears, just facts. And somehow the absence of emotion was more devastating than any breakdown could have been. This was a child who'd been through so much that telling it didn't hurt anymore. She'd gone past hurt into the numb place beyond it. And when you arrived at Mr. Weston's ranch? Blackwood asked. I didn't arrive, Ellie said. I collapsed. He found me in the snow, face down. I don't remember much after that. I remember his voice. He said, she's alive. About Josie. And that's when I knew it was going to be okay, because somebody finally cared whether she lived or died. Are you happy at the Weston Ranch? It's the first place that ever felt like home. Would you like to stay there? More than anything in the world. Why? Ellie looked at Caleb, then at the judge. Because he came outside in a blizzard. He didn't know what was out there. Could have been wolves, could have been nothing. But he came. And every other door I knocked on, people decided we weren't worth the trouble. Her voice strengthened. He decided we were. And that's the only thing that's ever mattered to me, that somebody thought we were worth opening a door for. Webb's cross-examination was brief. He tried to suggest Ellie had been coached. She shut him down with the calm precision of someone who'd been underestimated her whole life. Nobody told me what to say, she said. Nobody had to. The truth isn't that complicated. Judge Morrison called for closing arguments. Blackwood was brief and devastating. Webb was smooth, but his case had crumbled, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. The judge was silent for a long time. Then he removed his spectacles and spoke. "I've heard a great deal of testimony today, much of it painful to hear. The law does favor blood relatives, and that principle exists for good reason. But the law also exists to protect children, and when those two principles collide, the welfare of the children must prevail." He looked at Harriet. "Mrs. Crane, you failed these children in a manner this court finds deeply troubling." He looked at Caleb. "Mr. Weston, you've demonstrated care and commitment that goes beyond what duty requires." Then he looked at Ellie. "And you, young lady, have shown more courage and honesty in this courtroom than most adults manage in a lifetime." He put his spectacles back on. "The court grants temporary guardianship of Ellie Morgan and Josie Morgan to Caleb Weston for a period of 6 months. Mrs. Crane shall be permitted supervised monthly visitation. At the conclusion of this period, the court will reconvene to determine permanent placement, at which time the expressed preference of the older child will be given significant weight." The gavel fell. Ellie turned to Caleb, and her face broke open. Not crying. Something bigger than crying. Something that looked like a person putting down a weight they'd been carrying so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months. And then it's your choice. My choice. Yours. She threw her arms around him and held on. And Caleb held on right back. And Josie grabbed fistfuls of both their collars and pulled herself into the middle of it. Daniel stood behind them, his hand on Caleb's shoulder, and the courtroom hummed with the quiet approval of people who just watched something broken start to mend. Harriet swept out without a word, Pemberton trailing behind her like a shadow that wished it belonged to someone else. On the courthouse steps, Agnes hugged Ellie so hard the girl's feet left the ground. Dr. Foster shook Caleb's hand with both of hers. Tom Garrett said, "About damn time something went right in this territory." And Daniel, standing off to the side with his hands in his pockets, caught Caleb's eye and nodded. Just once, but it was enough. The ride home was different from the ride in. Lighter. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was the silence of people who'd been through a battle together and come out the other side. When they reached the ranch, Ellie climbed down from the wagon and stood in the yard, looking at the house like she was seeing it for the first time. 6 months, she said. Then it's permanent. You really think so? I know so, she nodded. Then she took Josie from Caleb's arms and walked toward the front door. She stopped on the porch and turned back. Caleb? Yeah? I'm going to make dinner tonight. A real one, to celebrate. I'd like that. And Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for opening the door. She went inside. Caleb stood in the yard with his son beside him, and the winter sun breaking through the clouds for the first time in weeks. You did good, Pa, Daniel said quietly. Caleb turned to look at him. His son hadn't called him Pa in 3 years. We all did, he said. They walked inside together. The house smelled like bread and coffee and something else that Caleb couldn't name but recognized. It smelled like the future, fragile and uncertain and absolutely worth fighting for. The first supervised visit came on a Wednesday in late March. The court-appointed supervisor was a woman named Mrs. Helen Pratt, small and sharp-eyed, who carried a clipboard like a shield and spoke with the clipped efficiency of someone who'd seen too many ugly custody fights to expect anything good. Harriet arrived in a gray dress with a lace collar, her hair softened, her expression arranged into something that was supposed to look like warmth. George Pemberton was nowhere in sight. Hello, Ellie, Harriet said as she stepped onto the porch. Her voice was honey over broken glass. You look well. And little Josie, my goodness, how she's grown.
Ellie stood in the doorway, Josie on her hip, and said nothing.
"May I come in?" Harriet asked, glancing at Mrs. Pratt.
"That's up to Ellie," Caleb said from behind the screen door.
Ellie stepped aside without a word. Harriet entered the house, and her eyes moved over everything. The clean floors, the warm stove, Ruth's photograph on the mantel. She catalogued it all with the quick precision of a woman looking for ammunition.
They sat in the front room, Harriet in the armchair, Ellie on the sofa with Josie, Caleb near the doorway, Mrs. Pratt in the corner with her clipboard.
"Tell me about school," Harriet began. "Are you attending?" "Yes, ma'am. Started in January."
"And how are you finding it?"
"I like it. My teacher says I'm ahead in reading and writing, behind in arithmetic, but I'm catching up."
"That's nice." Harriet smoothed her skirt. "I always thought education was important. I tried to teach you at home, but you were so resistant."
"You never taught me anything. Mama taught me to read before she died."
Harriet's smile tightened. "Well, regardless, I'm glad you're learning." She leaned forward. "Ellie, I want you to know that I've changed. George and I have spoken at length about what happened. We both agree that mistakes were made."
"Mistakes?"
Ellie's voice was flat.
"You call putting us out in a blizzard a mistake?"
"A terrible one I deeply regret."
Do you regret the part where Josie almost died, or the part where you got caught?
Mrs. Pratt's pen moved across her clipboard. Harriet's composure flickered.
"I deserve that," Harriet said carefully. "I know I've lost your trust, but I'm asking for a chance to earn it back."
"Why?"
"Because you're my family. We weren't family when you sent us walking. We weren't family when you chose Mr. Pemberton over a sick baby. We weren't family when you told me I'd be arrested if I came back." Ellie's voice didn't rise. It stayed level and steady, and that was worse than shouting. "You don't get to use that word when it's convenient and throw it away when it's not." Harriet's hands curled in her lap. For a moment, something real moved behind her eyes, something that might have been shame.
"I was afraid," she said quietly. "I was alone and poor and afraid of being alone forever. That doesn't excuse what I did, but it's the truth."
Ellie stared at her aunt for a long time.
Josie squirmed and reached for a wooden block on the floor. Ellie set her down, watched her crawl toward it. "I believe you were afraid," Ellie said finally. "But I was afraid too. Every single day in your house I was afraid. Afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of Josie crying too loud, afraid of the slap that came when dinner was late. I was 9 years old, and I was afraid all the time. And you were the one making me afraid."
The room went silent. Mrs. Pratt wrote. Harriet stared at her hands.
"I don't hate you, Aunt Harriet," Ellie said. "I used to. On that walk, I hated you more than I've ever hated anyone. But hate takes energy, and I needed all my energy for Josie. So I stopped hating you and started feeling sorry for you instead." "Sorry for me?" "Because you lost us, and we're pretty great."
Ellie picked Josie up, and the baby laughed, grabbing a fistful of her sister's hair.
"Josie says Mama now. She claps when the chickens come running. She took 4 steps last week before she fell. You missed all of that, and you'll keep missing it. That's your loss, not ours."
Harriet's eyes glistened. Real tears this time, not the performance she'd given in the courtroom.
"You sound like your mother," she whispered.
"Good. Mama was worth sounding like." The visit ended 20 minutes later. Harriet left without asking to hug the girls. At the gate, she stopped and looked back at the house. Something in her posture sagged, like a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long, finally going slack. Mrs. Pratt finished her notes and pulled Caleb aside. "That child doesn't need a supervisor. She needs a podium." She tucked the clipboard under her arm. "My report will reflect what I observed. a composed, articulate minor expressing legitimate grievances. An aunt who showed moments of genuine emotion but lacks the self-awareness to accept responsibility.
What does that mean for the final hearing? It means you're in a strong position. But Mr. Weston, she looked at him directly, don't get comfortable. 6 months is a long time. People change strategies. She was right. Harriet changed hers. The second visit, she brought gifts. A doll for Josie, a hair ribbon for Ellie. She was softer, more careful, asking questions instead of making speeches. She complimented the house, praised Ellie's cooking, admired how healthy Josie looked. Ellie accepted the gifts politely and set them on a shelf. After Harriet left, she didn't touch them again. The third visit, Harriet tried a different angle. She came alone, no Pemberton, no pretense. She sat across from Ellie and said, "I broke my engagement with George." Ellie looked up. "Why?" "Because you were right. I chose him over you and it was wrong. I can't undo what I did, but I can show you I've changed." "Changed how?" "I've taken in a boarder, a widow with a young son. I'm helping care for him. I'm proving I can be responsible." Proving to who? Us or the judge? Harriet flinched. Both. At least you're honest about that. The fourth visit, Harriet brought the widow's son, a boy of about 6 named Teddy, who hid behind Harriet's skirts and watched Josie with wide eyes. Ellie let him hold a chicken. The boy giggled, and Harriet watched with an expression that Caleb couldn't quite read. After that visit, Ellie was quiet for a long time. She sat on the porch with Josie and didn't speak until the sun was nearly down. "She's trying," Ellie said finally. "Yeah, she is." "Does that change anything?" "Does it change anything for you?" Ellie thought about it. Really thought, the way she always did, with the seriousness of someone who'd learned too young that words had consequences. "No," she said. "Trying now doesn't undo what happened. It just means she's finally doing what she should have done from the beginning." "That's fair. Is it enough for the judge?" "I don't know. But it's your voice that matters in that courtroom, Ellie. The judge said so." "My voice." She said it like she was weighing it, testing whether it was strong enough to carry the weight being placed on it. "Caleb, what if my voice says one thing and the law says another?" "Then we'll fight the law." "You can't fight the law." "Watch me." She almost smiled. Spring came slow to Montana that year, creeping in around the edges of winter like it wasn't sure of its welcome. Snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and mud and the first stubborn shoots of green. The ranch shook off its winter silence. Caleb bought new cattle. Tom Garrett hired on full-time. Agnes brought her goat over twice a week, and Josie would toddle after it, shrieking with delight. Ellie enrolled in the spring term at school. Miss Catherine Greer, the teacher, sent a note home after the first week. "Ellie is exceptional. Quick mind, kind heart, natural leader among the younger students." She broke up a fight between 2 boys twice her size by telling them they were embarrassing themselves. They apologized. Caleb showed the note to Ellie. She read it 3 times. "She said I'm exceptional," Ellie whispered. "You are." "Nobody ever said that about me before." Then nobody was paying attention. Daniel stayed through March and into April. He worked the ranch alongside Caleb, and the silences between them shifted from hostile to comfortable. They didn't talk about Ruth, not directly. But sometimes, in the evening, Daniel would pick up his mother's photograph and hold it for a minute before setting it back down. And Caleb would see his son's jaw working and know that the grief was still there, but it wasn't angry anymore. It was just sad. And sad was something you could live with. One night, Daniel and Ellie sat on the porch together while Caleb put Josie to bed. When he came back down, he heard them talking. "Your pa's a good man," Daniel was saying. "I know." "He wasn't always."
Or maybe he was, but he forgot for a while. After Ma died, he just stopped. Stopped caring, stopped trying, stopped everything. I thought he was going to drink himself to death. What changed? You did. Daniel's voice was quiet. You and Josie. You gave him something to care about again. Something to fight for. He gave us the same thing. Yeah, I guess that's how it works. People saving each other. Your mama would be proud of him. Of both of you. You think so? I know so. Because he talks about her like she hung the moon. And a man who loves that hard doesn't stop. He just needs somebody to remind him it's worth it. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You're too smart for 11. I'll be 12 in June. Still too smart. I'll work on being dumber. Please don't.
Caleb stood in the hallway and pressed his back against the wall and let the sound of his son laughing with his daughter wash over him. Because that's what she was, his daughter. Not by blood, not yet by law, but in every way that counted, in every way that Ruth would have recognized and blessed. The final hearing was set for September 15th. Judge Morrison's courtroom. Same room, same bench, same dusty shafts of light through high windows. But everything else was different. Caleb wore a new suit. Ellie wore a dress she'd picked out herself. Green cotton with white trim, because green was her mama's favorite color. Josie wore a tiny outfit she'd already stained with breakfast. Daniel sat behind them, clean-shaved for the first time in months. Harriet was there. Same seat, but she looked different too. Smaller somehow. The sharp edges softened by 6 months of trying and failing and trying again. Webb sat beside her, but even he seemed to know the outcome was already written. Blackwood was calm. He'd spent 6 months building an airtight case. Mrs. Pratt's reports were devastating in their quiet objectivity. Dr. Foster's updated medical records showed 2 healthy, thriving children. Miss Greer had written a letter about Ellie's academic progress that made the teacher cry while writing it. Agnes and Tom and the pastor and half the town had submitted character statements. The hearing was shorter than the first. Both sides presented their cases. Harriet testified again, and this time she didn't perform. She spoke plainly about what she'd done and why, and how she'd tried to change. It was the most honest she'd been in either courtroom appearance. Ellie watched her aunt with an expression that was neither angry nor forgiving, just clear. When it was Ellie's turn, the judge asked her the question that everything had been building toward. Miss Morgan, you're 12 years old now. You've lived with Mr. Weston for 9 months. You've had regular visits with your aunt. You've had time to think about what you want. So I'm asking you directly, and I want you to answer honestly. Where do you want to live? Ellie stood. She didn't look at Harriet. She didn't look at Caleb. She looked at the judge. With Caleb Weston, Your Honor. Can you tell me why? Because he came outside in a blizzard when he didn't have to. Because he picked me up when I couldn't stand. Because he fed my sister when she was dying and he didn't ask for anything in return. Her voice was clear and carried to every corner of that quiet room. Because when I told him we wouldn't be any trouble, he said stop saying that. Because he bought me boots and didn't tell me what they cost. Because he sits with me when I'm scared and doesn't tell me to stop being scared. He just stays until the scared goes away. She paused. The courtroom was silent. My aunt says blood is family, and maybe it is. But blood didn't come outside in the storm. Blood didn't warm my sister back to life. Blood didn't fight for us in court, or write letters to lawyers, or teach me how to read the sky for weather. Ellie's voice steadied into something unshakable. Caleb Weston did all of that. Not because the law told him to, not because blood made him, because he chose to. And I choose him back.
Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Judge Morrison removed his spectacles. He polished them slowly, replaced them, and looked at the courtroom with an expression that had shifted from judicial neutrality to something unmistakably human. "In 23 years on this bench," he said, "I have rarely heard testimony that spoke so clearly to the question before me." He folded his hands. "The court finds that the best interests of Ellie Morgan and Josie Morgan are unambiguously served by permanent placement with Caleb Weston. Full legal guardianship is hereby granted, with all attendant rights and responsibilities. Mrs. Crane's custodial claim is terminated. Should Mr. Weston wish to pursue formal adoption, this court will look favorably upon such a petition." The gavel fell. Ellie turned around and looked at Caleb, and her face did something that he would remember for the rest of his life. It broke open. Not with grief, not with relief, but with the kind of joy that only comes to people who've been through the worst and survived it, and finally been told they're allowed to stay. She ran to him, threw herself into his arms. He caught her and held her, and Josie squealed from Daniel's lap, and the courtroom erupted in the low rumble of people who'd just watched something right happen in a world that too often got it wrong. "We won," Ellie said into his chest. "We really won." "Yeah, kid, we really won." "I'm not going anywhere." "No, you're not. Never again." Daniel brought Josie over, and the four of them stood in a knot of arms and tears and laughter while the courtroom emptied around them. Agnes was crying. Tom Garrett was blowing his nose. Dr. Foster was shaking Blackwood's hand with both of hers. Harriet sat alone on her side of the courtroom. She didn't move for a long time. Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and walked to the aisle. She stopped beside Ellie. "You meant what you said," Harriet said quietly. "Every word." "Every word," Harriet nodded. Her eyes were red but dry. "Your mama would be proud of you, Ellie. She'd be proud of the woman you're becoming." "I know she would. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for the judge, not for the court. For you. I'm sorry I failed you." Ellie looked at her aunt for a long time. Then she said, "I hope Mr. Pemberton makes you happy." "I ended things with George, months ago." "I know. I hope you find someone who doesn't ask you to choose." Something broke in Harriet's face. She pressed her lips together hard, nodded once, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Outside, the September sun was warm on their faces. The crowd had gathered on the courthouse steps. Agnes hugged Ellie until the girls squeaked. Miss Greer wiped tears. Mary Henderson stood at the edge of the crowd, and when Caleb caught her eye, she mouthed, "I'm sorry." He nodded. It was enough. It would have to be. Daniel caught up to them at the wagon. "I'm heading back to Butte tomorrow." "I figured. But I'll be back for Christmas, and maybe—" He stopped, swallowed. "Maybe I'll stay through the winter, help with the ranch, get to know my sisters." He said the word like he was trying it on, like a boot that didn't quite fit yet, but might with time. "We'd like that," Ellie said. "Wouldn't we, Caleb?" "More than anything." Daniel stuck out his hand. Caleb took it. Then Daniel pulled him into a hug, rough and awkward and over too fast, but real. The first time they'd embraced in 3 years. "Ma would be proud," Daniel said roughly. "Of all of us," Caleb said. The ride home was loud. Ellie talked non-stop about the judge's face, about Blackwood's closing argument, about Mrs. Pratt's tiny smile when the gavel fell, about what she'd make for dinner and what she'd write in her journal, and how she couldn't wait to tell the chickens. "The chickens don't care about court rulings," Caleb said. "The chickens care about everything.
They're very emotionally intelligent. They're birds. Emotionally intelligent birds. Josie babbled along, adding her own incomprehensible commentary to every sentence. Daniel rode alongside the wagon on his horse, and every now and then, Caleb caught him smiling at something Ellie said. When they reached the ranch, the gate stood open. The house waited. Smoke curled from the chimney, where Agnes had kept the fire going while they were away. Ellie climbed down from the wagon and stood in the yard, Josie on her hip, looking at the house. "What is it?" Caleb asked. "I just want to remember this, exactly how it looks right now."
The smoke and the light in the windows and the sound of the chickens. Her voice was soft. Because this is the moment it became real. This is the moment it stopped being temporary. It was never temporary, Ellie. Not from the first night. She looked at him and smiled. Not the careful, guarded half-smile she'd been offering since the day she arrived. A full smile. Open and trusting and luminous. "I know," she said. "I think I always knew." They went inside. Agnes had left dinner warming on the stove. A note on the table read, "Congratulations, now stop worrying and eat something. The chickens are fed." Ellie laughed and set the table for 4. Then she stopped, looked at the 4 places, too big, too small. "It's a family table," she said. "It is." "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Can I call you Pa?" His throat closed. He had to look away for a second. Out the window, at the land Ruth had loved, at the sky she'd watched every evening from this very spot. "Yeah," he said. "I'd be honored." "Pa," she said at once, testing it. Then again, stronger. "Pa." She grinned. "That feels right." Sounds right, too. That night, after dinner and dishes and a lengthy negotiation with Josie about bedtime, Caleb sat on the porch alone. The stars were out. The air had the first bite of autumn in it. Somewhere, a coyote called, and another answered. He heard the screen door open. Ellie padded out in her nightgown and Ruth's wool socks and sat beside him. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Don't want to. I want to stay in today a little longer." They sat in silence. Comfortable silence. The kind that only exists between people who don't need words to know they're not alone. "Pa?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for opening the door." "You already thanked me, about 100 times. I'll probably say it 1,000 more." "I can live with that." Ellie leaned against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. Josie was asleep upstairs in the room that had been Ruth's sewing room and was now, finally, completely, a child's room. Daniel was in his old bedroom, the one he'd left 3 years ago in anger and returned to in grace. "Pa?" "Yeah?" "I'm going to write our story down. All of it. The walk and the storm and the doors that closed and the one that opened. So Josie will know when she's older. So she'll know how we got here." "That's a good idea." "And maybe someday other kids will read it. Kids like me who think nobody's coming. So they'll know to keep knocking." Because eventually one opens. Because eventually one opens. The stars turned overhead. The coyotes went quiet. The house stood warm and solid behind them, full of sleeping children and the smell of bread, and the ghost of a woman who would have loved every minute of this. Caleb looked at Ruth's photograph through the window. The glass caught the starlight, and for just a second, he could have sworn she was looking back at him, smiling, telling him what she'd always told him, that the measure of a man wasn't what he did when things were easy, but what he did when they were hard. He'd done the hard thing. He'd opened the door. Months later, on a morning bright with the first snow of the new winter, Caleb filed the adoption papers. Judge Morrison signed them without ceremony. Ellie Morgan became Ellie Weston. Josie Morgan became Josie Weston. And in the courthouse ledger,
in black ink on cream paper, a family was made official that had been real since the night a man heard scratching at his gate and chose to walk into the storm. Ellie hung a sign above her bed that she'd painted herself. 4 words in careful lettering. "This is my home." And above the front door, where every visitor could see it, Caleb hung one of his own. "This door is always open." Because it was, and it always would be.
For strays and strangers and children with nowhere left to go. For anyone brave enough to knock. For anyone desperate enough to try one more time. The door was open, the fire was lit, and the family inside had been built not by blood, but by a choice made in a blizzard, by a man who'd forgotten how to live until a barefoot girl reminded him why. That was the only ending worth having. Not perfect, not easy, just real. And real was enough.